Achtung, Achtung, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk, Imperial War Museum special number 3. When we're discussing what to do here, I said we're going to squeeze the lemon really hard, there's loads of pips. And we're here with James, of course, who's basically struck dumb by this object. He's just perusing it. And we're joined again by John Delaney, who is head of Second World War and mid-20th century conflict.
Absolutely correct.
1929 to 1949.
Okay, and earlier on when we were wandering around, and we've looked at the V weapons, we've looked at the Spitfire, we looked at Monty's Humber. I said, "What's your favourite piece in here?"
Yes,
and you've had a lifetime of working with these large objects.
26 years.
26 years. Well,
almost. Yeah. Makes me feel very old.
You'd be a very old dog if you'd lived to 26 years. This is your favourite object. Tell us what it is. Take us through it.
This is the nose section of a Lancaster 1 that flew with 467 Squadron in the Second World War, codenamed Fred the Fox. Well, nicknamed Fred the Fox because it was F in the sequence of letters for the squadron, so it was F for Foxtrot.
Does that make it Australian or Canadian?
Very good. It was a British squadron that was primarily put together to train Australians up to form the core nucleus of the Royal Australian Air Force, the Bomber Force.
Yep.
So 5 out of the 7 crew for this aircraft were Australian, and 2 were British. So the navigator, the pilot, it's easier to say which ones weren't British. The mid-upper gunner was British, and the bomb aimer was British. Everybody else was Australian on this crew. And that's an interesting thing as well about the RAF Bomber Command principally, but all through the RAF in the Second World War, in that there's this mix of nationalities.
Yep.
Everybody from all across the different nations of the Commonwealth and other places.
Yeah.
As long as they were good, it was a very meritocratic organisation.
They could do the job they were in.
They could do the job they were in.
A friend of mine's father, who was a Glaswegian who then moved to Tasmania, was in a Coastal Command bomber aircraft, a tail gunner in one of those, and flew on the Hamburg raid when they were making up the numbers.
Wow.
Yeah. So why do you love this object so much?
Well, because of the personal stories that are involved with it. We know the names of all the individuals, we know their background histories, we know the numbers of missions they flew.
They all made it through?
They all made it through. The aircraft did 49 missions.
Wow.
And then was retired from, which is a long mission count.
Yep.
For an aircraft to survive.
Yep.
And then was retired and actually went to Australia on a sort of fundraising, morale boosting, and at that point the guys who'd done their 50 by then didn't have to go back, which was obviously not normally the case with an RAF Bomber Command personnel. If you did your tour, you survived your tour and you were judged to be fit enough, you did another one after a few, you had a bit of time off, but you went back. But in this case, the guys didn't, so they all survived the war. And some of the missions, they did 16 Berlin runs.
That's amazing, isn't it? That is absolutely amazing. I mean, the thing looking at it, Al, I mean, what I find just so amazing is on the one level it's incredibly complex, on the other level it just absolutely isn't. And these things were designed for one thing and one thing only.
It's not built for comfort.
No, it's for dropping bombs. And you look at this is so thin. The metal on the side of it, it's so the concessions to human comfort are so minimal. There's only one pilot seat. There's not 2 pilots. There's not a pilot and a co-pilot. There's a little dicky seat on the right there. Look at it. I mean, it's just extraordinary, isn't it? And what you're not getting here is the 2 wing spars that you have to clamber over, so you get on. Which are where
we are here.
Where they would be here, yeah. And you've got to clamber over that to sort of get to that bit. I mean, it's so sort of thin and rattly and kind of Heath Robinson in many ways. But it absolutely does what it's supposed to do with bells on.
How many hours was a Lancaster airframe expected to last? What were they built for?
I'm not sure exactly how many hours an aircraft would be expected to last, but it was highly unusual for an aircraft to last more than 6 months on operational service. They just didn't. This aircraft had gained the reputation within the squadron of being a veteran aircraft after 22 missions, just about 3.5 months in. Right. So it had done 3.5 months, and people in the squadron were beginning to think this is an old girl who's made it this far. And because it was an old girl who had made it this far, it became seen as a lucky aircraft.
Yeah.
So it was one that people wanted to be on, even though actually it was probably the worst condition aircraft by the time it got to the end of it.
Yeah, because the stress and strain on the airframe and
when the squadron used to go up to form up to then move off into the bomber stream, after about 30 missions, this aircraft became so unreliable in terms of its rate of climb that it got in the way of everybody else. So they used to send it off in a different direction to climb to the right altitude and say, "You come and join us when you've got to the altitude." Even so, the crew wanted to be on this aircraft because it was a lucky aircraft.
dear God.
It's absolutely amazing.
Things people end up thinking, eh?
I know.
Right,
I know.
we're looking at the radio operator here. So
Yes, that's right.
So, and that's the navigator's seat next along, and then, like James says, there's the pilot because it's the souped up Manchester after all. With
It is
two
indeed.
engines. So the pilot flight engineer, which we talked about at the RAF BBMF, that they run it with two pilots now. The one they've got.
Yeah.
And then down there's the bomb aimer, and then there's nose gun. Should we go? Should we walk around?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just looking about this, and I'm just can't help thinking about Norman Jackson, the wing walker, who gets his VC. And I mean, every time you read this, you literally
it
can't believe what
doesn't make
happened.
any sense.
So they get attacked, and I can't remember. Is he one of the gunners or is he the radio operator? I can't remember. But anyway, they go out. He comes out. I think he goes out of that hatch above behind the pilot's seat there.
Yeah.
So what happens? They get hit. The engine's
engine
on
on
fire.
fire,
In a really bad way. If you look just very quickly, just go back again. You can see these two fire extinguishers. I mean, they're pretty feeble. Anyway, so he tucks one of those inside his Irvin, his sheepskin jacket. And they undo his parachute and hold him while he climbs out of the still flying but burning Lancaster at 22,000 feet or whatever it is. And they lower him onto the wing, and he's got an axe that he uses to kind of crawl along. And at one point he falls off and they get attacked, and he managed to get back on the wing, pull out the fire extinguisher, put out the fire, then they get attacked again, and at that point he falls off and disappears down into the ether, and they think, oh, bye-bye Norman, that's it. But actually the parachute opens still, and he becomes a prisoner of war, and that's that. Anyway, at the end of the war he comes back, and they kind of realises that he's already fated, and this story of his heroism. He's been awarded the VC. And he gets invested with the VC the same time as Leonard Cheshire, but because Leonard Cheshire of higher rank, Leonard Cheshire is supposed to get his VC before Norman Jackson, and Cheshire goes, "No, you go first."
Amazing,
because of what you did. And I mean, just imagine crawling out of a Lancaster at the top of a Lancaster while it's flying, while it's on fire.
I'd rather
Germany.
rather not imagine that.
That's just absurd, isn't it?
Yeah. So here we have these roundels.
Yeah, these are the 49 mission markings that it took on, and this is the nickname of the aircraft that they called it. They called it after it was POF in the score,ron, so it became Fred the Fox for Foxtrot. So a relatively straightforward.
Oh yeah, and there's the Aussie flag.
And there's the Aussie flag next to it.
Fred, because it's this old plane.
It's the old plane. It's the old dependable Lancaster that got them to Berlin 16 times and back.
And Berlin.
Bit of Irish linen patching it up.
How long a round trip's Berlin? That's it's
going to be a 9 hour.
It's a 10 hour round trip, isn't it? Long way, and a drip tray. Reassuringly, this plane does have a drip tray, unlike the Spitfire. And now we're at the bomb aimer, and you can hear there's some AV in the museum around us. You might hear little voices chipping in. So we've got the upper gun turret, or the nosed gun turret, rather.
Twin for every Brownings.
Yeah.
And then, is that the Mark 14?
That's the Mark 14 Sperry gun bomb sight.
Yep.
That he's got there.
Which is pretty much as good as the Norden one, really. There's not a lot in it.
The Americans wouldn't give us the Norden one, so we sort of made do. But as you say, it was a good bomb sight.
The Blackett sight.
Yeah.
So how does it? Is it a computer? Is it?
Yeah, effectively.
There's an analog computer. It looks rather like a very large briefcase. You can't actually quite see it because it's in the dark. But it looks like a rather large briefcase. It's an analog computer, lots and lots of whirring cogs to make your calculations on. A simplified version of the Norden, basically.
It's basically good, to be honest. There's not a lot
and
in
it. And it calculates. You tell it where you want to drop the bomb. It calculates the parabola and height and wind and all that.
It takes into account the wind speed, wind direction, because of course you don't know what direction the wind's coming from when you're going into the run.
Yeah.
Your speed will be a variable.
And it worked, didn't it? I mean, it was an effective bomb site for the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we're only trying to hit a small city, or a factory. I mean, a lot of the aircraft would have been. They 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 would using G and
Yes.
or H2S to get them to the right place. To
Those who
drop the
don't know,
bomb.
G is...
G is a radio navigational direction system
So it's a
where
beam.
there's a beam and you fly along a beam basically.
And if you fly too far one side, you get
You get
a dot, and if you go the other way, you get a
that's
dash.
right, you get, and then you can tell you're on by what you're getting. And H2S is a very, very basic form of ground surveying radar.
Yep.
which really reflects water very so water.
It could
water
pick up canals and lakes
Yeah,
and things
so
like
you-
that. That was probably the best thing. It could pick up big built-up areas as well. But so it got you to the right rough location.
And then there's oboe as well.
Yeah.
And of course you've got the
flying
pathfinders.
cigar as well. It's flying cigar.
Yeah.
For countermeasures and things like that.
Yeah.
Flying cigar? Don't know that one.
Well,
It's a countermeasures.
electronic countermeasure
It's a
thing.
countermeasures device. One of the things that when I'm talking to people about this is that the things that the aircrew didn't do. So like the wireless operator, we were looking at the wireless operator's position.
Yeah.
But actually, because you're flying in radio silence most of the time, and you're just on the intercom when you need to be on the intercom, the wireless operator he's got far more important roles than being on the wireless.
Right.
So he looks after the oxygen system on board the aircraft. So he has to make sure that all the oxygen systems are running, everything's flowing, all the right amounts of oxygen are going, so nobody's getting hypoxia by accident while they're flying. So that's one of his main jobs. And the other thing he's got to do is he's got the tail radar warning radar receiver. So he's the guy who tells the rest of the crew when the ME-110 is locked on. And we're just about to get attacked. So that was his
Because
other
what
big
you've
job.
got is this ongoing, it's an arms race basically, isn't it? A technological race between Bomber Commander, between the Luftwaffe, and you get, the ME-110, which as we all know is a failure as a heavy fighter in daylight in the Battle of Britain, then becomes this actually really rather successful night fighter because it's quick enough. One of the remarkable things about the Lancaster is how fast it is for a heavy aircraft. But the ME-110 can keep up, and they've got that Schrager music jazz thing, which is a cannon firing upwards.
Because they've got no armament underneath.
Exactly.
These. I mean, the weird thing is you've got the dorsal turret, which makes no sense whatsoever, and they haven't got a ventral turret, which is what you would have underneath. And again, you've got these which are just complete pea shooters. You know, you need 50 calibers or cannons really, and these 110s and Junkers 88s with their Schrager music come straight underneath them with 30mm cannons. I mean, these are big old slugs, and just shred these things because, of course, the metal's
But
so
the
thin.
RAF don't know what's happening for quite a while. The planes are just getting shot down, and they don't know how or why.
That's true, but I mean, in terms of the armament capabilities, I mean, the RAF know from the word go that the 303 is absolutely useless.
I mean, Harris spends most of the war lobbying to have better turrets and better armament on his Lancasters and doesn't get it. And it's one of those moments where we always think of Harris as being this kind of sort of all-powerful kind of one of the most senior commanders in the RAF, and he's not quite as powerful as and sort of almighty as all that, and he can't persuade them. And lots of crews die and are lost because they're just not equipped well enough, and that's because a compromise has been made. If you add in 50 caliber guns, machine guns or cannons, they're a lot heavier, they're a lot bigger, they cause more drag.
But surely taking them all off and making the bomber 10 miles an hour quicker without the weight of three guys.
Well, that's
the
the counter argument, and that's what they're arguing. And that's why they don't have them. But I mean, these are on pressurised cabins. They're hurtling with minus 45, minus 50 degrees.
Wind coming through.
You just look at the attachment of the plexiglass, the perspex on the front of this, the bomb aimers at the very front of it, and you can see that. And obviously, it's weathered through. It's worn out through age. But even so, I mean, it's pretty rudimentary, isn't it? It's amazing, really, what they went through.
I can see why John likes that Lancaster nose so much. Really, to be honest, I remember coming and looking at it. Do I remember that you used to be able to get in the thing? I think you used to be able to walk through it. Times have changed, health and safety. Join us after the break. Welcome back. We're still at the Imperial War Museum, as if we'd wander out during the break.
There's a little sing-song going over on the corner.
Yes, there's what is that, John? What?
It's just a movie to talk about
It's
morale,
mindset.
Mindset. The mindset of the ordinary soldier. Right. So they're having a nice sing-song, a cup of tea, and a cigarette.
No wonder we won. Right.
They've all got really bad teeth.
Of course they have. Now we've come around the corner, away from the nose of the Lancaster, to a boat
The littlest little
The
ship.
littlest little
Tamzine.
ship, the littlest little ship of all from Dynamo.
The rescuing of the BEF from Dunkirk. And of course, if you were to watch the movie, the recent movie, you would think that these were
You've seen the movie, John?
I've seen the movie, yes.
you'd be forgiven for thinking that it was little ships that rescued 338,000 Allied troops, because that wasn't
Well,
quite right.
you get what, 10 people in this?
if you're lucky. And of course,
He's got to make quite a
little
few
ships
journeys.
didn't really transport them back to the UK either, was it? The little ships transported them out to the destroyers.
5%
lying
tops?
off. Yeah.
Tops.
Stop it!
No, it's true.
Stop it.
They were big ships. They were big ships.
Yeah, and there's a Spitfire in a film that has about 9 hours of ammunition in it
Yes,
as well.
that's right.
Quite
And lands on a
annoying.
beach,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
did happen, but is completely stupid. You would never do that with the undercarriage down. Why would you? Because you'd risk going nose over.
Yeah. But I think is it obviously this is it's an interesting item, this, because you've got to tell the story of Dunkirk.
Yes.
This is the way into the story of Dunkirk, but it's also as you two have so ruthlessly and mercilessly you've poured loads of water on that particular idea. But this is how a museum has to work sometimes.
Yes, you need
because you can't have a destroyer in here, obviously.
But what you don't want to do is
Some room.
you don't want to underline an historical unauthentic piece of information by continually banging on about it. So I don't think we do around here. But I think this is a great exemplar of something else. It's even though there was only a small percentage of these doing the job, there were civilians who just got in their small craft, went over and risked everything.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself, I think, is absolutely amazing. One day you're a fisherman off the Kent coast, next day you're under fire getting people out of water.
Yeah.
Well, one day you're just a civvy who likes mucking around in boats and tying reef knots and things, and the next minute you're exactly right in the middle of the war zone. So from that point of view, he's absolutely right. I mean, what is really interesting though is again there is this myth that every time you got into a boat you were attacked by Stukas and sunk, and actually, although there were a large number of ships that were lost during the evacuation. No, I should change that. There were a large number of vessels that were lost.
Yeah.
75% of those losses were little ships, and 75% of those losses were down to misadventure.
Well, collisions,
too many people trying to scrabble onto them, and all that sort of just sinking because of weight of too many men on board and all the rest.
The RAF were doing a pretty effective job of
the RAF were doing a very effective job. You've got 10 temps cloud the whole time, which is exacerbated by the fact that the Germans have bombed the oil depot, so the oily smoke is also kind of clouding it. Also, dead calm sea for literally the entire week. And the first day that the sky's clear is Saturday the 2nd of June. And though they go, okay, well, we'll do a halt to daylight operations, we'll just do it at night time. But later that night, the last British troops are lifted, and that's it. And it goes on to the 4th to pick up French troops. But at about 11:30 p.m. that night, General Alexander, my old friend Alex, and Bill Tennant, who's a senior naval officer there, who's been sent over by Ramsay on the morning of Monday the 27th, they go down a little motor launch with a megaphone going, anyone still there? Anyone still there? And when they're satisfied that no one is, they go home and they signal evacuation completed. I mean, literally every single man, apart from badly wounded, is lifted. He's absolutely remarkable.
But no vehicles. How many vehicles did the BEF leave in northern France?
Oh, it's a hell of a lot. It's like 40,000.
40,000 or something,
it's
isn't it?
Absolutely enormous, and that's. That is the big problem, because suddenly we're short of guns, we're short of tanks, we're short of carriers and all the rest of it. Because Britain, the BEF is the most mechanised army in the world. It's the only 100% mechanised army in the world. So that is a big problem. They've got to kind of create those fast. The little ships do play an absolutely enormous part. There's no getting away from it. But it's just what just riled me about about the film is that it's just so misleading. It just implies that it's all Mark Rylance and his mates kind of lifting everyone off, and that just isn't the case. It is vast majority of the troops that are lifted by destroyers, channel minesweepers, channel ferries stacked up on the East Mole.
But this thing that we've talked about from time to time, but also that we consistently do ourselves, is the Navy. We don't talk about the Navy.
The Navy are absolutely stupendously good.
And central to all the stories we tell. Because we were talking about North Africa earlier on. How on earth did we get to North Africa? I ask, by ship. And this is the thing that so much of the way that the British and I'm not even saying the Allies here, the British fight in 3 dimensions.
Yes.
It's because the naval power is
Enables
colossal.
them to.
And also, it also answers the, when you get into the idea of how come the British state was able to turn things around so quickly and arm itself in a way and deliver in multiple theatres very, very quickly. It's because we've been doing that for like 200-300 years.
Yeah.
Because we've had an enormous navy for 200-300 years, a vast navy. And the little, even the story of the little ships ignores the navy. The way people talk about the way people talk about the Battle of Britain ignores the navy. The way people talk about Normandy ignores the navy.
Well,
it's a
okay,
seaboard
Al,
landing, for heaven's sake.
Al, I've just been doing because I've been, since I finished writing Normandy and it came out last year, I've been kind of sort of thinking about it and talking about it and so on. And you have sort of more thoughts. So I've been doing some kind of rewrites for the paperback edition. And
am I in
one
it?
of the things... Oh, yeah. You get personal mention. And
no, I've already checked.
When I was with Al... Anyway, so one of the things that struck me was exactly this, that, there's so many arguments and debates about, who had the... Germans were 4 times better than Allied troops and all the rest of it. We can argue the toss about all that, but one thing that is absolutely 100% certain is that on 2 planes of warfare, in the air and on sea, the Western Allies were absolutely the best in the world, bar none.
Yeah.
I mean, naval gunnery, naval seamanship, to be able to clear those mines, those minefields, before the invasion fleet at Normandy is absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
To do that when you think of the scale of the fleet that's following behind them and what would happen if they cock it up. Yeah. And it's at night and it's stormy and all those kind
Perhaps
of
we
things.
should be in HMS Belfast. I think we've come to the wrong museum.
Yeah, maybe we should. Well,
You're always welcome, gentlemen.
But also, I mean, if you think about it, last time I was at Long-sur-Mer, those amazing German naval guns on the cliffs, the other side of Arromanches. And you look at them, and there on one of the guns, you can see where the shield has been smashed, and you can see where a shell hits the breech. That knocks out. That's been fired 5 miles out to sea by HMS Ajax. I mean, that is just astonishing, isn't it? They've got there's no lasers to guide them or anything like that. That is just.
But to come back to this boat,
skill.
though, the point you made earlier, John, that you do have civilians taking their boats out and getting involved in evacuation, because we are talking about a total war. We've looked at a very famous general staff car in our time here, a Spitfire that James can tell you that you both can say who flew it, a boat that civilians got involved in the war, and then a machine for killing civilians, the Lancaster. The totality of the Second World War is I think certainly the reason I keep coming back to it as a topic, and why it really is so interesting. It's not the old way of doing it. That the way, for instance, that Wellington would fight with an army that was made up of scumbags and cutthroats and the officer class. It's a total.
Yes, it's absolutely correct.
So in that respect,
total war, it's a total
right,
world war.
Exactly, and it's right to remember the little ships for that reason, even though they don't fit in the story the way that maybe they do in Hollywood. But I mean, that's the thing that I think that is really, for me, is really incredibly interesting about all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a human drama of war, absolutely. And the Second World War affects every man, woman and child of all the main protagonist nations in a way that no other conflict ever has. And I think that is certainly what drew me to it in the first place. And it's what continues to be so fascinating.
Well, I think that's a perfect point
isn't
to
it?
stop,
That felt
isn't
conclusive,
it? Shut
didn't
up, stop talking. Thanks very much for listening. A huge thanks to John Delaney.
And thanks to the Imperial War Museum for
head
letting
of
us come
20th, Second World War, mid-20th century conflict,
1920 1949.
Thank you.
Cheerio.
Cheerio.